Hey everyone, it's Shawn McBride, and I'll be joined in just a minute with Deirdra Watson. We are going to be doing a summary of what happened with our Best in Events show in 2020, but we're also going to be taking a look forward to 2021. So this has been a very interesting year for the events space. The pandemic and the virus really changed a lot of attitudes. We're still going to be feeling those effects going forward. I think one of the open questions we'll probably talk about at some point is how long forward do things change for, and what changes are permanent. So I'm going to pop Deirdra up on the screen. We're going to go through some of our most popular topics. What we did was we went to our Best in Events YouTube channel, and we looked for the shows that you all spent the most time watching and what you paid attention to. And so we took those topics and ideas and we brought them forward and said, let's summarize those. Let's talk about the lessons in context of the entire year. And then we're going to look forward and we're going to make some projections and some ideas for 2021 based on that. And by the way, we are still looking for guests for 2021. So if you know somebody great, if you have some great insights, reach out to us. We'd love to get some more people on and really keep moving forward with our commitment to help people with understanding what's happening in events, particularly in this very uncertain time. So Deirdra, good to see you.
Hey, good afternoon, Shawn. How are you doing today?
Good. Year of change for you too, and we briefly touched upon your wedding during the show.
I did.
People learned about that in the broadcast.
Yeah, I did get married in August. Yeah, it's been a crazy time, and my husband and I are also relocating. We've had an opportunity to relocate to where I grew up. Mm-hmm. So that you just make those decisions. You go, yeah, you know what? We work from home,
right?
So we can work anywhere as long as I got a high-speed internet. We're good. So,
yeah. You used to always say high-speed internet and near an airport, and I don't even know if you need to be near an airport anymore.
Yeah, we received our fiber optics internet about June.
Yeah.
And before that, we were on your basic DSL. So it's been really nice to be able to. I mean, I have five laptops, so I'm always going on heavy on multitasking. But yeah, this year for events has been different for all of us that have been doing events. I've been doing events for 25 years, and just to go back on how we came to do Best in Events, the series, was you and I had talked in February of last year. We did a program on Best in Events, and what I kind of saw would be the future of events, which I had some clients that were saying, I don't know if I want to do events anymore. And people were saying, I want the networking, I want the face-to-face. And then bang, all of a sudden, February, March of this year, we get hit with COVID and totally decimated the event industry. And that's how we came to start the Best in Events series. And we've really had a tremendous amount of speakers that are experts in their fields, from contracts to destination management to incentive management to those that have done bigger conferences. So it was really great that you were open to kind of let's have a wrap up on the whole year and how it really went and what people are doing right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's been just an unusual year, right? I don't think this year, if you were looking at people's plans 1 year ago today, as we're exiting 2019 going into 2020, I don't think many people would have predicted what we've seen. So it's been an unusual year. And so it changed a lot of things, put a lot of pressure on events, and really took us a new direction. So, and I think one of the things that we're still dealing with today, and one of our popular topics for last year, was planning for contingencies, and really just the what if, right? Even now, almost a year into this pandemic, depending on how you measure, people are still taking contingencies into account, right? I mean, if you're trying to plan an event 2, 3, 4 months from now, you don't know what's going to be going on with lockdown orders or access to facilities, et cetera. So contingencies remains a very important planning item.
I think that is probably when you're doing contracts.
Yep.
One of the biggest things. And we've recently heard and seen that some venues are not including force majeure in their contracts. And, because a lot of the bigger venue, well, everybody's been hit by, the pandemic, and there's a number of hotels that have actually closed down completely. I think there's been 4 in New York City alone that have closed down because of the pandemic. And I think there might have been one in Washington, D.C. that closed down. And so we're seeing that, but we're seeing that, force majeure is not being included. Now, when we had Heather Reed on, who was talking about planning and contingencies, she actually stated that I think one of her contracts that she has looked at had 16 to 22 pages of force majeure in the contract. I think it's really key that when in moving on in future, that your force majeure needs to include not only about the venue, but also what you expect from a virtual component. And I liked Heather's idea about as a planner or as a corporation who's going to be using a venue, having your own contracts. And if you want me to bring my event to your venue, here's my contract.
Right. Yes. And a lot, we as lawyers, I have my lawyer's hat on, and I'm looking at contracts for my clients. One of the primary things we're looking at is what we call risk allocation, right? Who's taking the risk? And that has become even more pressing. And of course, one thing you've kind of alluded to here, some of these venues may be shutting down. You may enter, and of course, the standard force majeure provisions need to be updated because, what if you sign a contract now, you want to have a certain number of people, and then that's not allowed by the time you get back to your conference. You've really got to build that in there. And I think, like you say, it's a potential buyer's market. So, go out there and say, this is what we require, right? And we're going to ask you to share the risk with us in some way, shape, or form, right? If the local city says I can't have an event at your place, then I need you, the hotel, to work with me. I'm not going to pay the fee to have a non-conference, right? You have to kind of think about these issues in advance.
Right. And there have been some that have basically a lot of things that I've seen, because I'm involved not only in the event industry, but also the wedding industry. And there have been some that have said, the venue won't give us our deposit back. They want us to book next year, but we don't know what's happening next year. And they don't want to give the deposit back. Now, I understand to a degree that a lot of venues may have put out money already, but it's almost like I'm thinking venues don't have that reserve.
Well, yes, I think that's a real issue, and I think that's something else you need to think about. Is what if your venue goes out of business, right? I mean, you put your deposit down, you're ready to have your event in March. They're hanging on by a thumbnail, and they're trying to make it, and then they have another shutdown order, or business doesn't go well. And then by the time it comes time to show the event venue's closed, that could be a real issue. I mean, that's become more of a possibility, right? It's always been a possibility in the past, but not that likely. Now, with the financial situation of a lot of these venues, it's very possible that you may sign a contract and potentially, particularly a smaller or local venue, may be out of business by the time you need to go there.
Exactly, because they're all being hit. I know there's a number of new hotels on the Holiday Inn side that have opened about 2 hours away from where I am. And I do have a friend that works there, and he says, but they're busy, but they're not doing events. They can't do events.
Yeah.
But they're also in a ski area too, so people are skiing.
Right. Well, yeah, and I think maybe that's kind of the unusual part of this year, right? Is skiing is less of a it's certainly not supposed to be a contact sport. You shouldn't be touching people, and theoretically you should be socially distanced. So it's kind of this reallocation, right? People are going out of these large events with lots of people and trying to find ways they can stay socially distant, which points to different hotels for different reasons, right? And I can see that. I can see skiing being popular this year because people want to get out and do something. And it's theoretically something where you're not going to be too close to many people for too long.
That's right. Yeah.
So it makes perfect sense. So, but we got to really be thinking about contingencies in a new way. We got to run a lot of what ifs. And that kind of picks up the contract point too, right? I mean, that was a big popular show this year, was the contracts. And I think this is the year to really rethink your contracts. So look over those contracts with a fine-tooth comb. Don't just sign them. Understand what you're getting into, and then really look for any deletions. Like you say, if a force majeure provision is no longer there, then what happens, right? I mean, and you got to figure out what you're going to do if the shutdown order comes, or if something happens and you can't have your event. How do you get your money back? How do you move forward?
I think one of my biggest recommendations, and I've fallen into this myself on times that I've worked with clients, and they have someone internally that has done the conference or set it up, and then I, as a professional, I'm brought in and have to then deal with inconsistencies on the contract side.
Yeah.
And my recommendation to anybody that works on a corporate event that might not necessarily be a corporate planner
Uh-huh.
is to reach out to a corporate planner who's got the background on understanding contracts
Mm-hmm.
and going through contracts with, as we say, our fine-tooth comb, and reading them and knowing what the legalities are, because in the long run, our goal is to save the client money
Yes.
and to make sure that the client is wowed when we're doing their event. But if we're also putting out fires regarding what the contract was signed at in the first place, then we have to build in our within our negotiations after the fact. We have to build in certain concessions with the venue in order to get what the client really needs.
Right. Yes. And you'll probably have to talk risk allocation with your client, particularly if you get that venue that won't give you your force majeure provision. You're going to have to say, hey, look, we're taking a big risk here.
Exactly.
You may end up having to pay for two venues in a worst case scenario. Is that a risk you want to take, or do you want to search for another venue? These are real conversations that need to be had.
Well, and certain, because what we've been through in regards to the pandemic and loss of revenue on many sides, because if you've got a conference that was canceled, that's a sales conference and a user-based conference, you're losing revenue right there. So you've already lost on your return on your investment, but the venue's also lost. And what I've really seen this year is we have started doing some hybrid, but in regards to contracts and in regards to staffing, making sure that the hotel, if you are doing a small on-site, making sure the hotel has got all their safety protocols, all their cleanliness protocols. What is the what if you're going into a lockdown again, like in Ontario, where I live, the province of Ontario, we're going into lockdown as of 12 a.m. on the 26th.
Yeah. And
So that means like where anything that we've already done is now being canceled for the next 28 days.
Right. And so you see it there you see it in Ontario, you see it in London. We're seeing it particularly in different areas of the U.S. that have been changing. New York shut down a lot of the restaurants.
That's right.
Just you have a plan, and it doesn't work out because the numbers change. So you got to really be cognizant of that.
Yeah, for sure.
And that kind of brings up the next piece, which is the virtual events. So one strategy, obviously, for this is to just get rid of the venue either partially or completely, and say, hey, let's just have everybody go from wherever they're at. That way, we don't have to worry about these restrictions, right? We don't have the safety concerns. Obviously, virtual events bring some other challenges with them, and we had several guests on our YouTube show this year about that, talking about how to make them engaging and what to do with them.
Yeah, it is tough because, of course, when we first started with the pandemic, everybody was like heading to Zoom and heading to Facebook and whatnot. And I think that now, after 10 months, we're all for a while there we were Zoomed out.
Yeah.
Now we're starting, because we're getting to that next phase again. I think what we are seeing happening is the hybrid event, which is where they're including the social distancing at events. There's been a number of corporate events on the event side, industry events, and they're trying to see what's working.
Yes.
And in even regards to table setup, you've got a 6-foot long rectangle, and the person's got that whole table to themselves. And also in regards to the virtual, and I've been doing virtual events probably for about 7 or 8 years now.
Yeah.
And so what we would do is we would do, we'd have 50 people inside a venue, but then other people would come in virtually, or we'd have the presenter come in virtually. Because of different locations that they were at. So it's not anything new. It's just that we were thrown into it very quickly. And I think that what planners, or let's say what corporations, have to remember is that when you're doing a virtual event and a live event, you've got 2 different budgets.
Mm-hmm.
Because a virtual event can, in essence, actually cost you as much or more than a live event, and it's due to all the technology, all the other variables that will go inside, especially when you've got speakers that are external.
Right.
And you might have to do some extra training for your speakers so that they are comfortable with the technology, because not everybody is going to be comfortable with the technology and what the technology can offer or do.
Yeah, and mailing the technology too, right? So either you need to rely on your speaker or experts, current technology, whatever they have. Some people have better setups than others, or I've heard of people like mailing out microphones, mailing out the cameras, mailing out the setup, and that, and then you got to figure out what do you do as far as getting it back, returning it. But you're looking at a lot of money to have multiple cameras out there on the road, and then the FedEx keys and everything else to move them all around where needed.
Well, and where do you do that? Like, I helped out a U.S. company over COVID. They needed a banner sent to a speaker here in Canada. And so I went, oh, I can do that. And so I have a supplier that was able to do the banner up. And then I actually went and picked it up and delivered it direct to the speaker because it was within an hour of where I live. So it's really making sure that your speakers have all of their equipment, have all of their paperwork. I've done a couple of virtual events, one in September, one in October, where I had to write a specific script with all of the timing, because people don't realize a live event does not have to be so time specific.
Yes.
But a virtual event, it's like doing a television show. It has to be time specific, and you have to be down to like the second on your switching, on your speakers. So I was writing scripts for speakers. You have this much time for this slide, and marrying the slides and their text to what their timing is. And I've done a lot of facilitation and a lot of time building. So I'm really good at setting time allocations.
Yep. But it just brings up a whole new level of planning and different planning than what we've been used to.
Exactly.
There's been a lot of talk, about the vaccine. So, 2020, we spent a lot of the year talking about how the vaccine would come and what it would do. Now people are actually being administered the vaccine in different parts of the world. And, we're seeing a lot of issues here. And now I think there's some uncertainty. People thought, at least some of our guests did, and some of the viewer comments thought, hey, vaccine will show up. People take the vaccine, everything goes back to normal. But, there's a lot of questions coming up around the vaccine. Not everyone wants to take it. And then now we're still hearing that potentially you could still transmit the virus even with the vaccine. So it raises a lot of questions about what do we do with our events, and how do we have these mixed audience potentially of people that are vaccinated and people that are not vaccinated?
Yeah, and that was what I've been reading a lot about that, and here and I'm sure in the U.S. as well is the long-term care and healthcare workers are being administered the vaccine
Mhm.
first. One of the questions in one of the groups that I'm in was, what happens when you've got, you know, A, B, C,
Yeah.
and C has been vaccinated, you know, full vaccinations because there's two vaccines,
Right. Yes.
two uh, two treatments, and so you've got A who's not been a vaccine or vaccinated.
Yeah.
You've got B who's got one vaccine, and then you've got C who's been vaccinated for twice.
Yes.
And what are the protocols going to be? And because we're not all going to be vaccinated at the same time,
Yeah.
because they're slowly rolling it out. Um, so when we get to that point, it's the recommendation is that everyone still follow the mask and sanitizing protocols
Yes.
until everybody is vaccinated. Now, my question, because nobody has stated this, you know, are you going to have a badge or a card? Like, you have to carry a card in your wallet that says, "Hey, I've been vaccinated."
Yeah.
Almost
Well,
like your blood donor card, right?
well, yeah, here in the U.S., they are issuing the cards, but supposedly they're for the record keeping of the person getting vaccinated, so they know when to come back for their second vaccine, you know, and it's been largely unpopular, the idea of having to show the card to go places, right? And that raises, you know, medical privacy issues. We have some strong medical privacy issues in the U.S., and we have similar laws in Canada where you're not
That's
supposed to
right.
be asking people about their medical status. You know, and of course, one of the ancillary questions is, okay, well, you didn't get a vaccine, but why didn't you get the vaccine? Did you just not? Did your number not come up yet? Did you opt out of it, or did you not take the vaccine? Maybe you have a medical issue, you know, and you have some pre-existing condition. Your doctor said, "Hey, it's going to pose a risk to you because, you know, we're seeing anaphylactic shock here a lot in the U.S., right? So maybe your doctor says, "Hey, I think you have a risk of going into shock, and I don't recommend you take the vaccine." Well, you know, how do you handle these people for the conference, right? Because now you're going to you could potentially be excluding somebody because of their medical condition.
Yeah, and you know, the most medical condition we are able to ask on a form
Mhm.
is, you know, about your food. Do you
Right.
have food allergies? That's it. We can't ask anything about, you know, race, creed, color,
Right.
gender. Like in Canada, we can't. I know it's a little different in the U.S., but you can't ask about someone's medical health. Now, I do
Yeah.
know we did ask for one event, and I think it was an American event. You know, there are certain aspects of this conference, for example, strobe lighting.
Yeah.
You know, do you have heart problems because strobe lighting will be used?
Yeah. Yeah. And the strobe
You know,
lighting, you know, and then we have our Americans with Disability Act, which, you know, allows people who have disabilities to ask for reasonable accommodation. So a lot of people
exactly.
into they may not affirmatively ask, do you have it, but they'll put it like a note or something on there, like, if you need accommodations, please contact us so we can accommodate you. And
That's
that's
right.
like you say, so it's been very hands off on medical questions, you know, but now as we move forward, you know, the hands on really potentially become stronger. I mean, I know Ticketmaster again got a lot of press, a lot of discussion, but they were talking about some kind of app where you would have your identity and then a database of vaccination status, and it would match the two together. And if you had a current vaccine or if you had been tested for coronavirus recently, then you would get a, you know, a check mark or a thumbs up or whatever, and they would let you into the concert. And then if you didn't pass this database check, you know, you would be excluded, right? And I could see a lot of issues with trying to implement that kind of technology for our conference.
Well, and especially because that's private,
Yeah,
and
well,
you know,
ticket,
there's all privacy legislation
yeah,
around a whole bunch of other things,
right,
and giving out someone like if Ticketmaster has access to a database,
yeah.
what else is in that database that
Right.
Ticketmaster would have
Yeah,
access to?
well, supposedly they're just checking the database. They don't actually have access to it. They just query your name and it comes back with your vaccine status.
Hmm.
But it does still raise a lot of questions, right? This database is out there. They're accessing the database. They're connected to the database at least at some level. And then also, you know, the privacy issue. Now you're telling everybody else in the place whether you got a vaccine or not, right? So,
Yeah.
I mean, the people standing in line behind you are going to see whether you had the green check mark or not on your app, right? So they're going to know. And so that's a privacy issue. And then, of course, what do you do when somebody says, well, I didn't get my vaccine because, I thought my doctor thought I might have anaphylactic shock, right?
That's exactly, because there are some indicators of people having allergic reactions to the vaccine.
Right.
And that happens all the time. Now,
Yeah.
the vaccines that they are manufacturing do not have, for example, eggs in them.
Yes.
As some other vaccines do. So, and I can't remember exactly what they are, something like a phosphorus or something like that, that's having a reaction to. But it's still, the vaccine has been fast tracked, and I read an article that the reason that it was fast tracked is because when SARS came around, is that they've already been doing research on many different infectious diseases. So it's almost like they went, okay, great, we've got this. Let's see if we can get a vaccine out in a short time period.
Yeah, they built on existing technology, but
exactly.
Still raising a distribution issue, as we're talking about, raising a kind of who's in, who's out issue, and some of the longer term concerns. And here in the U.S., and I imagine it's the same most of the world, it's not even officially approved in the U.S. at this time, right? It's conditionally approved for emergency use. They're rolling it out, they're giving it to people, but it still doesn't have the full stamp of government approval on it. So that employers, I know a lot of employers are thinking about that question, right? Can I tell somebody to go get a vaccine that still hasn't got a full governmental approval? It's got a partial governmental approval.
Health Canada just approved the Mondera or whatever that one is.
Yeah,
they just approved it.
Do you know if it's a full approval or if it's like a partial approval?
As far as I know, what I saw was Health Canada approved their vaccine.
Yeah, U.S., what they've done so far is a partial approval. So we're approving this for emergency use, and we're continuing our evaluation. So the government hasn't even officially said it's approved. They're saying you can go ahead and use it on an emergency basis. We're going to continue to collect data.
I know you're talking about the Pfizer one.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, and I think Moderna's in the same category.
Moderna, right? Is exactly, yeah. So Health Canada has different regulations and rules, of course, than the FDA. And so sometimes drugs are approved here, but not approved in the US.
Yes, and
vice versa.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. So, all of this is pointing to a lot of changes in the events industry, right? So everything is kind of topsy-turvy. And, even on the vaccine point, right? All we can tell you right now is pay close attention to this and start seeing where the regulations come out, because, we asked a lot of questions there we don't have answers for, as far as excluding people, asking them medical questions, separating people, marking people at your conference. These are things we don't have answers for, because we really are going to have to look to governmental bodies to tell us what's legal and what's not.
Well, hopefully,
I
was just going to say, hopefully now that, we're in, I think the second week of the vaccine being administered to healthcare professionals and long-term care, hopefully we won't hear of any adverse reactions in the next, I guess, let's say, because I think it's 21 days after you've had the first phase of the vaccine, you go for the second phase. So, I think everybody's watching to see what's going to happen.
Absolutely. Yeah. So changes, right? So that's the big issue we have right now. It's just kind of evaluating all of that. What do you recommend people to kind of just take a clean slate to this? We talked about this in a couple of our shows. It's just like, you really need to start over with your planning and just come out with a fresh set of eyes, not trying to do what you did in the past, but figure out what you can do in the current environment.
I think the biggest thing is the safety and well-being of attendees and your staff. And if you feel that it is going to make people more comfortable, then include hand sanitizers and masks as a giveaway. And this is going to be around for at least another 2 years, where we're wearing masks on a constant basis. And my husband and I, we'll be in the car and we'll go, okay, muzzle, because we're covering our face and we just call it our muzzle. And so it's not something we want to do, but it's something we have to do. And what it's doing is it's protecting those around you and protecting yourself, but it's mostly those around you that it's protecting. And, if for the next 6 months we have to social distance to keep each other safe, I mean, I work at home. I don't go out a lot. We go to the grocery store, we do what we need to do. But we see that there's a lot of instances where it's the younger under 40.
Yeah.
That it's more, they're more active, they're more out there, they want to party, they want to enjoy life. But maybe it's time for everybody just to step back and say, this is what we need to do in order to keep people safe.
Right. And I think that brings up an important point for the events, which is you're probably going to have the same mixture of attitudes at your event, right? Some people are going to show up and they're going to be like, hey, I'm going to, keep 6 feet away from everybody, wear my mask, I'm going to stay in my hotel room when I don't need to be out and about. And then you have other people who will be like, hey, let's party, let's go to the conference, let's go hang out, we'll go get some drinks, and we'll go sit in a booth together at the local nightclub, and and then we'll just go back in the morning and go back to the conference, right? So you're going to have some really different attitudes within your attendees.
And I think one of the things and it just came to mind on this, and it's not something that we actually talked about and during the conference or during Best in Events, but now, knowing what we know, I think that there's going to be a lot more look into insurance for events because of COVID. And I don't mean event insurance in regards to food poisoning or incidences or anything else like that. I mean insurance in regards to what happens if somebody gets sick.
Yes.
At your event.
Yes.
In regards to an infectious disease or any other situation that is brought on by something such as COVID.
Yeah.
And what is that insurance going to look like? And that's not something that I think has been brought out there. It's all about force majeure and contracts and everything else. But I think that you have to take a look at the insurance and what that looks like.
Yeah, one thing being discussed here in the U.S., and it's being worked through, and it's going to vary, and this may become an important consideration in event planning too, is that liability protection, right? So there's a number of different laws that are working their way through the various states in the U.S. that deal with liability for businesses, employers, people that have customers coming in. So, an event will probably, depending on the way the laws are written, be treated much like a business, right? So this may become a consideration in picking your venue, right? Are you gonna go to a state where maybe you get a liability protection? They say, hey, if you're hosting an event and somebody gets sick, we're not going to allow them to sue you, versus going to a location where they say, hey, if somebody gets sick at your event, it's your responsibility. That may be a big decision in where you want to host the event.
Well, the venue would, of course, have their insurance.
Yeah.
But I think what's going to happen is that insures them and their staff.
Yes.
But and as a planner, my clients have had to have their insurance.
Yeah. Well, the rule in the U.S. generally is you sue everybody, right?
Yeah, exactly.
One of my first lessons in law school is the law professor gives us some fact pattern about all these different people who were involved in a scenario. And then he asked people who you sued, and he started, surveying the class, and different people started pointing to different people. And then, the real answer is you name all of them in a lawsuit, you bring everybody into the lawsuit, you let the court figure out who's going to pay. And, that's at least the way the U.S. system works. So, just you being involved means potentially you might get sued if somebody gets sick.
That's right. And as planners, we have our business licenses, but does our insurance cover us enough to take on that liability? Because if we have staff that may potentially give one of the attendees an illness, does that fall on us?
Mhm.
Does, where is that line drawn now
Yeah.
going forward, especially with insurance?
I think it's going to be a real question, and here in the U.S., a lot of the insurance companies got away from things like mold and a lot of these other types of claims because they were hard to calculate and hard to figure out. So I can imagine a lot of insurance companies are probably going to try to sidestep, a COVID type liability. They're going to say, hey, I don't know. We don't know where the COVID came from. We were out of it, right? You figure
Right,
it
we're
out.
not going to cover you.
You
Yeah,
can't insure COVID, right? Because it's just too uncertain and it's too costly. So, it's an important consideration to be going forward is who's going to bear the liability and what does
that's
that
right.
look like?
Yeah,
And cleaning, that leads into kind of the cleaning idea. We had a great guest, Christy Redfern, joined us and talked about cleaning. And by the way, we keep referencing past shows. So feel free to go back to our Best in Events YouTube channel and you can pick up these specific episodes if one of them's of interest to you as a viewer. But Christy came on and talked about cleaning, and that's going to be important right now more and more. I think events prior to this pandemic, you want a clean venue, you want a venue that looked nice, but you weren't really thinking about detailed cleaning procedures. And now all that's changed.
Oh, it's for sure. I haven't been to any events, but I can tell you, I've been to a number of restaurants, and I have never seen restaurants so clean.
Yeah.
And
restaurants are spending a lot of time on not just the cleaning, but to show you they're cleaning, and I was in a restaurant the other day, and I mean, the guy was cleaning, but it was almost a production, right? He brought out things, he sprayed things down, he was not only cleaning, but he was demonstrating to everybody watching that he was cleaning.
Yeah. And we did have Dave Stevens on, and he had just been to Connect. He had been to can't remember the other event that he went to. My apologies, but he had also gone on a fam to Cuba.
Yeah.
Or not Cuba, sorry, Cancun. And he had said that the procedures at the resorts in Cancun were amazing.
Yes.
Yeah, and I just recently read an article by someone else who had written about going to resorts, and that he's a writer for one of the papers up here, and he spent 28 days in the Dominican, and the processes and procedures. Now everybody is wearing masks, unless you're maybe sitting at your beach chair. But other than that, when they do recommend that you wear your mask everywhere. They're sanitizing everything. That if there's an outdoor restaurant, there's only a certain amount of people that are allowed. And I think that we've all, we're all trying to keep people safe.
Yep.
And it's that whole respect for others and that cleanliness, like I mentioned before. We've got our house up for sale because we're relocating, and at the door I've got masks, and I've got hand sanitizer, and I've got a note that says, please wear a mask while in the house and use sanitizer. And everybody's compliant. I think, initially we were all afraid. Now I think there's still some of that fear.
Yeah.
But we're all getting used to doing what we need to. And protecting those around us.
Yeah, and I think, one thing that, David brought up too in our show was, this whole concept of how do you make sure the rules are followed, right? Because, inevitably, especially if you have a large number of people, you're going to have some people that are not going to follow the rules.
That's right.
And so he talked about some creative solutions for that. But I think that's something you need to put into your planning set now too, is not only what are we going to do, what rules are we going to have, but how are we going to enforce it in a practical way that, doesn't upset our attendees too much, doesn't cause somebody to have an episode, but also make sure that everybody is getting what they expect.
One thing that I would love to recommend to planners is that along with your contracts is that you find out what their sanitation procedures are.
Yeah.
And when you're doing your site checks, whether they're virtual or on site, is to ask those questions. and find out if, like, one of the resorts that this gentleman had stayed at, he said that each room had a tape,
Yep.
almost like the caution tape,
Yep.
but it had a tape across the door saying sanitized.
Yes. Hmm.
So you knew when you got back to your room that your room had been sanitized, and find out how often hotel staff
Yep.
go into your rooms. What
Yeah.
are they doing in regards to buffets? Because we've virtually seen buffets close down. However, at the resorts, the buffets are still open. And because what they're doing is they're having staff
Yes.
fill your plates. And this is something that the cruise ships also did, was staff would fill your plates.
Yep, and I've seen that at places now too, right? You put up some kind of whatever appropriate safety barricade, and then
That's right.
people will actually basically go down the line, and the staff without touching you or touching any of the, and nothing gets touched between different people.
That's right.
It can be done, but you need to ask those questions and think about that, right? And make sure that you're happy with their procedures, right? Are you happy with the way they're doing it? Is that process feeling safe to you? Do you think that will be something your attendees will feel comfortable with?
Yeah. And I think it's really just that whole, I hate to say it, but cleanliness is next to godliness. Because we see a venue clean. They always say if you go into a venue's washrooms,
Yeah,
that's what their kitchen looks like. So
right.
if the washroom is a mess, the kitchen's a mess. And
Yeah.
what is the protocol for their kitchens? I know when I have done site checks in the past, I always ask to see the kitchen because I know what I'm dealing with during the event.
Yeah, and
And
you just
I
got to
make
go a little deeper than surface, right? I mean, that's it.
exactly.
Look at the back of the house, and ask questions about the procedures, right? And
Yeah.
just and it used to be just you could kind of eyeball it, right? I mean, you came in there, if everything was neat and spiffy and looked good, that would be enough. But now, that's not necessarily enough. It needs to be sanitized, even if it looks clean. You need somebody to tell you, hey, it was sanitized in the last whatever 5 hours, 10 hours.
That's right.
Case might be,
And especially since in the past, many venues were dealing with, they might have 4 or 5 events going on at the same time.
Right.
So
Yeah.
you've got that cross, I'll
Yeah.
say,
Yeah.
contamination.
Right. Yeah. And a lot of them, like you say, they would come in there to do it. They do pretty good cleaning at nighttime in most of your major hotels, right? They'll come through and do, a good cleaning, but you need somebody to come by in the middle of the day and then in the afternoon and to wipe down the handrails and the door.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah.
And you can't just assume that it's being done, right? I think most places are trying to be proactive, but this is the kind of thing, like you say, you want to get into your contract. Like you will wipe the doors down every 3 hours or whatever the right number is that you feel comfortable with.
Any surface that is touched by hands
Yeah.
should be sanitized on a regular basis.
Yes.
They call them touch points.
Right.
And it's ensuring again that your attendees are going to be safe. And we've also talked about many different other things, whether or not these hybrids are going to be regional or anything else like that. But what are if you're doing a smaller venue, what are those smaller venues doing?
Yep.
Do they fall? There's so many different. Right now, there's a number of the larger hotels have got their global. I'll call it. There's global sanitation processes now.
Yep.
So what are the sanitation processes? And those things should be in the contracts.
Absolutely. Get it in writing, get it locked down and get it agreed to. So how do we move forward, Deirdre? So if somebody's sitting there and saying, hey, I'd really love to get back and at least do something, virtual, hybrid, something in 2021, but I'm just not sure where to start. What would you say to them?
I would suggest, first and foremost, do a survey, because then you'll know what the comfort level is of people.
Yeah.
Many companies are still looking at that virtual component
Yeah.
Or even as far as incentive programs go, they've stopped incentive programs, but they're doing a gifting program instead.
Yeah.
So you'll find that the incentive and travel business, they won't be going to an incentive travel for at least another 2, maybe 3 years. The survey, I would suggest doing something regional instead of these big 10,000 plus
Yeah.
events that we know that some companies such as Oracle and everyone else did in San Francisco. You're not going to see that for a long time.
Right.
You will see more regional, where you've got maybe max 250, which if you're doing social distancing, 250, that's a big ballroom.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially when you've got to give 6 feet in between each attendee. Travel restrictions, we have to look at travel restrictions. What are travel restrictions going to be for businesses? Because now that you've got, the majority of people are still working remotely.
Yes.
What does that look like? Because they may no longer be where the head office or where the corporate office is. So, and I think it's really listening to your staff, listening to your clients. Yes, we all want to get back to doing in-person events, networking face to face, but how do we do that in a safe way to keep clients from getting ill, not only from COVID, but other infectious diseases? And it's interesting when you look at, I guess, the timeline of different infectious diseases, because it's almost like every 10 years.
Yeah.
There's been an infectious disease. And so we have to be more aware of, we're such a global world now. We are global world anyways, but global traveling, global business, where people from all over the world are traveling to different locations. And I think that we have to be aware of that. Like what's going on is, for example, in Australia, that if someone from Australia is coming to Canada or coming to the US, what is going on in Australia on an infectious disease area, or Saudi Arabia, or the UK, or any other country? What's going on in Canada for, even travel to the US, and our borders are still closed, which is horrible.
It's unbelievable, really. I mean, you wouldn't think about that as part of your planning scenario a year ago.
Exactly. And if you are doing a global event, how is that going to affect your location?
Right. And that can change quickly, right? Because, like UK apparently has a new strain, and a lot of countries say, hey, UK, we're closing off the borders because you've got a new strain that we don't have, and we're trying to keep it out. And so that stuff can change very quickly in your planning scenario. So just because you check the chart right now, you think you got the location down, you think you know who's going to attend. You may lose a speaker, you may lose a large block of your attendees. You don't know, depending on something that pops up unexpectedly.
Yeah, and you might be starting to plan a conference now for 2022, but what happens 3 months before? And, we were all blindsided by COVID for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
But as planners, we're all able to pivot relatively quickly.
Yeah,
but
sometimes there's only so much pivoting you can do, right? I mean, if the U.S.-Canada border is shut down, you're going to have a hard time getting people between the U.S. and Canada. It's just the nature of it.
And I don't know. I think, well, it's probably closed now again until January 21st, because it's every 21st. So I think they said it's going to remain closed to only to non-essential.
Yeah.
And I've got friends that live in border towns. They're like, and their parents might live over in the U.S. They can't cross the border to go and see them.
Yeah, and that's right. I mean, Canada in particular, a lot of the population lives south and close to America, and people are just used to moving back and forth between the two countries to take care of their business and to live their normal lives. And
I do know that some of the snowbirds from Canada, which go down to Florida, some are actually flying out of Toronto because, of course, they can't cross the border, but you can fly out.
Yeah.
And they're having their vehicles shipped.
Yes.
To Florida. Yeah.
Yeah. I am not surprised by that.
No.
So,
they're like, I'm not going to be staying here over the winter. It's like,
right.
Are they taking their chances on getting COVID while in Florida?
Yeah. I mean, Florida still remains. We're somewhere in the middle of the U.S. stack. We have a large population, so yeah. I mean, there's definitely a different risk profile.
That's right.
So these are all calculations you have to have, right? So I think that was a good summary, Deirdre, of what we did.
Yeah.
I want to just say thank you to our audience and the people who have tuned in. And, I know some of you wrote while we were talking today, so feel free to drop your comments after the fact. Let us know what you learned, what questions you have. We're looking forward to doing more shows for you in 2022 or 2021 and 2022 eventually. But yeah, we're looking forward to doing shows with you. So we read your comments. We appreciate them. We appreciate you guys for tuning into all the shows. Go check out some past episodes. Deirdre, it was fun doing these things. I learned a lot, and I hope we helped some people. I think a lot of people gave us some positive feedback.
Well, and I definitely love to be able to continue this in January and throughout the next year. And if anybody who is watching is interested in being a guest, please reach out to Shawn or myself.
Yeah, if you want to be a guest, or if you know a good guest, if you say, hey, this person has great insights on the event industry, that's what we want. We're here to help. We live this industry. That's kind of how we got started in this thing, in different aspects of it, and now we want to keep bringing experts in it so we continue to develop a conversation to move the industry forward. So let us know. Deirdre, it was a lot of fun. I hope you have a good holiday and a happy new year. And
as well.
We'll be back at this again, guys, early next year. We're looking forward to reading your comments. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.